Hi everyone. In today's video, I'm going to be analyzing the dating advice. It's just a numbers game. So this is going to be part of a new series that I'm doing where I'm rating common pieces of dating advice on a tier list. So this is just going to be common pieces of dating advice that you hear either online or in real life that people often say. So it's just a numbers game. This is a pretty common piece of advice that you'll hear. And the basic concept of this advice is that talking to a large number of women is the way results are obtained. So, to put that into other words, getting results is about putting in the volume, about talking to a lot of women. It isn't necessarily about what you do because most of the time these interactions aren't going to lead to something. So, you have to put in the numbers. That's why we call it a numbers game. So, this advice is actually going to be more common online than it is in real life. You're probably not going to hear like your parents or like a teacher tell you that dating is just a numbers game. And this is because we have a lot of cultural notions around dating being something special. It's about finding your person. There are a lot of ideals that are associated with dating. So you're going to hear this advice from more practical, less idealist people, people that are less influenced by the ideas of like true love or finding the one. So it contradicts directly with the concept of there being the one or soulmates. So this is a quote from Rollo Tomasi. There is no one. This is the soulmate myth. There are some good ones and some bad ones, but there is no one. So here are some pros of the advice, and I'm gonna try to be as objective as possible. So it tells men not to overinvest in any one interaction. So this is good. This is good because if you overinvest in any one interaction, especially as a man, you're going to be very disappointed because most women are going to reject you. If you're not a celebrity, if you're not super good looking, super high status, most of the time you're going to get rejected. And that's just because of nature. That's because of biology, but also some social factors influencing that. This is just hypergamy that influences this. So that's definitely a pro. And another pro, or potential pro, is that it rationalizes rejections as just reps. And this is going to be pretty psychologically healthy because it's going to basically reframe rejections as just practice or just part of a broader search of finding the right woman for you. And this makes intuitive logical sense, this advice does, because casting a wider net equals higher chances of finding success. We apply this to many areas of our life. It's like you wouldn't expect to apply to only one job and then get an amazing job, especially not these days with the current job market. Or more literally, you could cast a wide net in order to find high quality fish, to find the fish that you're looking for. If you cast a small net, you're probably not going to find the fish you're looking for in that net. And it also avoids one-itis. So what is one-itis? One-itis is like basically a disease. Well, not a real disease, but it's an analogy comparing thinking that there's a one to a disease, right? So having a one-itis is very common. The way most people would say this is that they have a crush on someone. This is very common among younger people. They might have a crush in high school that they're obsessed with, that they think, I need to be with this person. And if you're a man, chances are she doesn't like you back, and you just have to accept that. There are 4 billion women on this planet, so you don't have to just be focused on one girl. Even though psychologically it makes a lot of sense to become attached to one person. But rationally speaking, there are a lot of women that you could talk to. And another pro, the last pro, is that it will probably yield results if you put in a lot of numbers. If you talk to a lot of women, unless you have very low SMV, like a 3 or below. But if you're like a 4 or above, there will be some women that find you attractive. They may be few and far between if you're like a 4, because 4, you know, is increasingly not enough to get results. But it is enough if you put in enough numbers, if you put in enough volumes, if you approach enough volume, if you approach like hundreds of women. So this is a chart I made about the importance of volume maxing. So volume maxing just means, putting in a lot of volume talking to a lot of women, and this is more specifically cold approach. So if you're a 5 SMV, if you're a 5 sexual market value, and you have average game, maybe you'll have like an 85% rejection rate. That's just an estimate. And if you're 7 SMV with the same level of game, if you just have average game, you might get like a 70% rejection rate for cold approach. But if the person with 5 SMV and the guy with 7 SMV do a different number of approaches, if the 5 SMV guy does 2 times the approaches, quantitatively, that's going to be the same number of results. That's going to be the same number of numbers that you're going to get from cold approach. So this is basically a chart that explains the importance of volume maxing when talking to women, which is kind of showing that I'm a little bit biased in one direction, but I am trying to weigh the pros and cons here. So here are the cons. So how you act, game/riz, also matters. You know, if you have really bad game, then you're probably going to get rejected, you know? Almost certainly. If you have really bad social skills, really bad game and social skills aren't exactly the same thing, but there's a huge overlap, then yeah, you're going to get rejected a lot, you know? And this is something that you can work on, you know? And this is something you should do at the same time as talking to a lot of women, you know? Because if you talk to a lot of women, but you use a very dumb strategy, like you go up to women and you just ask them for sex or something like that right off the bat, that's probably not going to yield any results. Like basically no results. So you have to kind of use game, kind of use your social skills to increase the odds of any one interaction working out. So that's a con of this advice. And it also forgets that taking action could be a challenge for a lot of guys, including myself. So it's not always easy to talk to a lot of women. In fact, more often than not, it's very difficult. It's very difficult to get the ball rolling and start approaching a lot of women because, you know, guys are naturally very anxious about this. I am very anxious about this, and it was even worse for me just getting started with approaching women. And this advice just doesn't really take that into account. You know, it sounds like it's invalidating the feelings that you're having that come up when you try to talk to women. And the sort of barrier you think there is between you and her, that barrier being, you know, your anxiety that's really preventing you. It's kind of like you're fighting yourself. You're fighting yourself to be able to approach. And this just makes it out like this is something you can just decide to do. Just decide to do like 10 approaches in an afternoon. It requires a lot of self-improvement to do 10 approaches in an afternoon for most guys. And mass rejection can hurt too. So mass rejection would mean that like you approach like 50 women and like 45 of them just reject you, right? So that would be a mass rejection because you're getting like a pretty low ratio of numbers. And that can hurt. You know, 10% actually isn't that bad. 5 numbers out of 50. Let's say you do like 100 approaches and you get only 1 number. That would be an example of mass rejection. That would be pretty bad. You know, that would definitely hurt your ego a little bit. And you might have to step back and think, you know, what strategy am I taking that's leading to this? Or maybe I just don't have high enough SMV. Maybe I just need to relocate to somewhere where my SMV is more adequate or something like that. And also, the last con is PW. So this stands for poisoning of the well, and this is more of a concern if you're approaching on like a college campus or something like that. Because, you know, word might spread around and say, and women might post, you know, on Reddit or something like that. Did anyone else get approached by this creepy guy? And like you might get a reputation for yourself. But you can kind of avoid this just by talking to women, you know, in more of like a regular public area, you know, like approaching women on the street. Like that's probably not going to cause PW unless you do it like a massive amount of times and you're in a small town. But PW definitely is a concern. So an overall rating of the advice is B tier. I'd say it's good with caveats. So these are good points. But most guys that give this advice will give these caveats and will say these things also. There are very few guys, I don't know if I've even seen a single guy who just said, It's just a numbers game and nothing else. Obviously we all know other things matter too, right? But I think overall it's good advice. This is the advice that beginners need to hear because that's the number one mistake that beginners are making is just not taking action. So if you take action and you put in numbers, you're probably going to yield results and you're probably going to get better naturally. But also you have to, work on your looks, work on your game, work on your overall SMV. That's all great. But the number one thing you need to do if you're a beginner is just get out there. And I'm trying to take this advice myself. I haven't done many approaches. I've only done 8 approaches, right? So that's not good enough. I need to get up to at least 100 by like the end of this year, hopefully. And it's good to set goals like that for yourself. So yeah, thanks for watching, everyone. And if you have any suggestions for dating advice that I should analyze or rank, please leave them in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe if you enjoyed this video and follow me on Instagram, maybe Rumble, because sometimes I get my videos taken down. And yeah, thanks for watching.